While I've been out and about walking this summer, I've noticed something really interesting about the thistles growing in this field that I want to show to you. It's a phenomenon called fasciation. Fasciation is a kind of abnormal growth pattern where the growing part of a plant, which is normally just a single point, becomes elongated or stretched, and as a result the formation of stems, leaves and flowers can become wildly distorted. So here's a normal form of this species of thistle. I think this is a spear thistle. And now let's have a look at some of the fasciated examples. On this example, the stem has become very broad and flattened, like a paddle. And this broad stem is crested with a single flower structure that's been distorted into a continuous wavy and convoluted line. In another one here, the flower structure is sort of curled back in on itself, forming this brain-like mass. In other examples, the leaves and side shoots are clustered in an abnormally dense way, and in some cases uneven growth has occurred, resulting in the plant growing into curves or spirals. So let's look at a few more of these. Now, in case you're wondering, the term fasciation comes from the Latin fascia or fascia, and it just means band or bundle. Fasciation is quite common in the plant kingdom, and it can be caused by a wide variety of factors, including genetic mutation, viruses, bacteria, fungi, chemical exposure, hormone imbalance, attack by insects or grazing animals, or physical injury by frost or damage by humans. It's not completely clear which of these factors might be at play here, but I suspect physical damage. The whole field is full of these thistles, but the affected plants all occur on a fairly straight line across the land, a little bit downhill from where some new pipes were laid a couple of years back. Now, whilst it's tempting to jump to the conclusion that the pipes might be seeping some chemical contamination, the specimens nearest the line of the pipe are perfectly healthy. I remember walking here when the work was taking place, and the affected plants are actually just the other side of where the spoil was stacked when the trenches went through. So a far more likely explanation is that the growing crowns of these plants along this line were damaged in some way, maybe a vehicle rolled over them when the trenches were refilled. So that is fasciation, which I think is fascinating. Ready? You okay? So we've had our dinner, baked potato, cheese and salad. That was very nice. And we just come out for a little wander across the fields here, through these lovely thistles, which are all a mass of thistledown and ragwort, various other wildflowers and plants. And it's time for dessert. And we're going to head over there and get some dessert. So over here we've got some really super blackberries. Look at that, perfect. So sometimes you can tell which one's going to be really good because they're just a little bit bigger and softer than the rest. That's going to be a really good one, I think. Let's see if I'm a good judge of that. Oh, it's so sweet, so sweet. So yeah, this is dessert, and when they're this good and this abundant, you can afford to be a little bit picky and just a bit discerning and just select the ones that look really nice and ripe and ready and sound. And these don't need washing or anything, they're just so fresh and lovely. Look at that. Just eat them straight off the bush. So delicious. I think this might actually be my favourite way to enjoy blackberries. No need for added sugar. It is just the pure fruit in its most natural form. So out for a little walk, and I just wanted to show you the difference between blackberries and dewberries. So these are blackberries, Rubus fruticosus, and they're pretty delicious. And growing right alongside, we've got dewberries. Now, a lot of people don't pick dewberries because they look like kind of malformed blackberries, and they look like maybe they've gone a bit off or something like that. But actually that's the way they're meant to be, and the fruits have got this kind of bloomy appearance. They're much more difficult to pick because the fruits often fall apart when they're handled, and very often these things grow side by side, and sometimes they hybridize as well, and you end up with something that's a kind of cross between a blackberry and a dewberry. So those are blackberries there, and that's a dewberry. Now that's a pretty good one there, so we're going to pick that one there. And as you can see, it didn't come away whole, but if I can just I'll pick a nice blackberry and we'll compare the two side by side. So there we go, blackberry on the right, dewberry on the left, and the dewberry's got a kind of bluish waxy bloom on the fruits. So flavour wise, dewberries a bit more acidic, almost like a red wine flavour to them, compared to blackberries, which are, I'm not sure if they actually require any description, kind of fruity, dark forest fruits flavour. Dewberries are often as small as this. There's one here, and it's only got three little drupelets like that, if I can get the focus. There we go. 3 little drupelets, and those will come off and separate out from each other, so it's like 3 separate little berries almost, like that. But so very often dewberries are not picked for that reason, because they're just difficult to handle and a bit more awkward. But they are just as good as blackberries. They are different, and it's worth looking out for them. Now, unlike the blackberries, which are a thorny, kind of stiffly growing and climbing plant, dewberries are typically much more of a sprawling sort of thing. So this is a typical habit for dewberries to grow. And so, as you can see, the stems are much more slender and got a sort of whitish colour to them. And the thorns on these are kind of like little bristles, really. So we've got blackberries growing in amongst them, but dewberries here. Now, dewberries normally flower and fruit a little earlier than blackberries, but there is an overlap which allows these two plants to hybridize. If I can find a good example of a hybrid, the natural hybrid that I can see today, I'll point it out. Often it results in interesting fruits that are larger, or sometimes that ripen unevenly, so the hybrids aren't always very useful for picking. So here's an example, and it's not a particularly good example, but this is very likely a hybrid of blackberries and dewberries because it's got kind of slightly more slender stems, but there's definite thorns on them, but they're smaller than the average thorns. And look at the fruits. The fruits are these kind of halfway between blackberry and dewberry, so they're glossy like blackberries, but they have fewer drupelets like dewberries. So, take smaller mouthfuls, Michael, is a piece of advice I've heard from many people in the course of my life, and in many cases that was really good and valid advice. However, I'm going to say that for blackberries there is something rather different and special about eating a whole handful of them at once. I don't know if I can describe it to you. Maybe it's just something you need to try, but there is something very different when you eat a whole handful of them and you have a mouthful of these things versus just eating them one at a time. So yeah, I'm going to cram a bunch of these in my mouth now and try and describe what that's like. The flavour, the aroma just explodes, and all of the juice, and it's just a different experience. It's like the difference between having a little piece of a peach and taking a great big bite of a really good peach. So if you're out picking blackberries and you find some really good ones, within reason, don't choke on them, but try shoving a whole handful of them in your mouth at once. It's something different. So that is blackberries and dewberries. I hope that's been interesting. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.